Well, hello, and thank you for joining us on today's Ask the Mayor program. This is the second of a two-part series with Mr. Paul Radford from the Georgia Municipal Association, where we're talking about various initiatives of the most recently completed General Assembly. So stay tuned for today's Ask the Mayor. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about it, what do you expect for the future, and what do you see GMA's role as we move forward into the next year?
If I can, I think as a segue, I want to go back to one of the issues dealing with taxes. I think it's very, very important to get an understanding of that parameter in which the members of the General Assembly seem to be operating. And even the governor said at a press conference last week that the property taxes is one of the most hated taxes around.
Sure.
One of the reasons is because what you just said, it's the most transparent tax. It's one that is very local, very personal, and one that people understand.
Right.
But they also can tie that dollar of tax dollars to what services they get. And I think that is where this whole debate occurs. But secondly, the governor and the Speaker of the House had a set of data that they say that they're concerned with property taxes because local government spending, in their words, is, quote, out of control. Now, I have to refute that because the data that they're using is completely wrong, or if the data are correct, they're presenting it in the wrong way. In local government, we have basically 2 or 3 fund sets, just like you have in your own personal finances. You have a savings account, you have a mortgage, you have different accounts that you have certain responsibilities for. In local government, we have general operations, your general fund.
Right.
And that's where generally your property taxes come in. You bring in your sales taxes will come in there. And generally you're going to be paying for your operations expenses, your administrative staff, your planning and zoning, your building code folks. But your largest expense is going to be your police department, your fire department, your public safety.
About 50%
about
of our
50%.
budget.
That's pretty consistent around the state. The other numbers you have are what we call enterprise funds, which are expected to remain balanced or certainly not go into a deficit. And enterprise funds are your water, your sewer funds, garbage pickup, and the like. The governor and the speaker are using numbers and saying here's where local government spending is out of control, but they're including enterprise funds. Now, I can tell you that we don't refute those numbers, but we can tell you where the expenses are coming from. The cost of providing clean water has gone up a couple 100% over the last several years because of the cost of environmental regulation, or simply the cost of materials, steel, pipes, gasoline. The cost of providing roads has gone up dramatically because of the cost of asphalt or other type of petroleum-based products. The cost of providing those services has gone up not because of a mismanagement at the local government level, simply because of the economy in which we're operating. And I can tell you, this state would come to a screeching halt if you didn't provide, or your county and city together didn't provide clean water.
Oh, absolutely.
Or you didn't provide roads that are the ability to provide commerce on. And I think that that is an education part that they're not telling everybody, is that the cost, basically the taxes are the cost of admission of providing a commerce that is going to sustain everyone's livelihood and everyone's lifestyle.
You know, Paul, we take a lot of things for granted. You just mentioned clean water. I was traveling out of the country last week, and one of the things you're always told, don't drink the water. Well, not only do you not drink the water, you don't brush your teeth with the water. You brush your teeth with bottled water. And you don't realize how inconvenient that is. I mean, it's so convenient to do things like that we just take for granted.
Correct.
And that local governments provide. What you're saying is exactly right. The cost, we are building and are almost finished with a new sewer treatment plant. Because of all the environmental restrictions that are placed on that, the cost on it has risen tremendously since the last one that we built. And of course, because of the restrictions on where you can have them, and we're consolidating into large plants and closing small plants down as a result of the restrictions in the metro Atlanta area with the North Georgia Water Planning District restrictions that we have. And all of that has driven the cost up. We've seen our water rates go up as a result of that. And yes, I guess someone could say that's the local government's problem, but we're adhering to federal and state restrictions that are imposed on federal governments, and there's a cost to do that. And when you look at local governments, and I know I heard some legislators say that local government was out of control. Well, I can tell you in the city of Douglasville, I've been in office for almost 12 years. We've grown tremendously. Between 2000 and 2006, we were the fourth fastest growing city in the state. We've continued to provide, I believe, good service to our citizens. And do you know that we have not added any employees during that tremendous growth period? And our budget, as I said earlier, we haven't raised the millage rate to generate more revenue. We've figured out, and I think it's consistent throughout Georgia, cities have figured out how to do things more efficiently, be more cost effective in their operation of their city government, manage their facilities and their assets better. And that's how you can continue to provide good service. Local government's not out of control, in my opinion, when we're managing the citizens' money just like it is our money at home. And it is our money. When you think about it, we all pay taxes, you and I, you and I both. So as we move forward into the next legislative session, I think we all agree we need a comprehensive study. Do you think that's going to happen?
You know, I think if I have a crystal ball, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I wish it would. I don't see it happening. I think that I think we'll be faced with some degree of tax reform again in the next year. I don't know whether it'll be something that the House takes the leadership position on. The Speaker did say that tax reform sometimes takes time, and the Governor made the point this past year on certificate of need and several other pieces of legislation that they have been studied over a 3 to 4 year period. I wish the Governor would call for a commission and invite schools to the table, invite citizens to the table, invite the business community, invite local government to the table, invite members of the House and Senate, and let's bring in some of the experts from around the country. And not like other states can do it better. There are a lot who have done it much worse than we have. Somebody asked me that question, where do we rank among other states? And in the end, we're pretty lucky. We haven't had the problems that Florida has, or Indiana, or Michigan, and certainly California. Or Colorado, that had a tax and expenditure limit and then had to take it off because it was causing them some serious problems. We would hope that the Governor would do that. Now, whether he will, I don't know. But regardless, we think as city officials, we have a message that we need to continue to take to our citizens, that there's a value in having local decision-making, having decision-making being made at home.
That's right.
And you having an influence over your own tax dollars. And then also taking that to the General Assembly and educating them on what it is that cities do. We can't speak for counties, but what is it that cities do that make your life better? And then also be advocating for them to address what we consider to be some of the basic fundamental problems that local government has, particularly cities. Metro Atlanta is a unique environment. We're faced with severe drought. We're faced with water supply issues, and we have very limited partner on the state level. You don't get very many dollars from the state, I would suspect, and you get $0 from the federal government.
That's correct.
Water and sewer and environmental compliance is a local responsibility. And all of our water and sewer systems around this state are getting old. They were built probably 30 to 40 years
Yes,
ago.
they are.
Some of them, Atlanta's was built well over 100 years ago. And you can see how much money they're having to spend in their system to clean it up and to make sure that it'll provide sufficient collection and treatment for the next 50 years, next 100 years, because Atlanta is so important to Georgia's economy. But we've got around the state so probably $11 billion worth of infrastructure needs, capital facility infrastructure needs in the next 5 years alone. That's just cities.
Sure.
And transportation is certainly high on that list, but the number one need that we have is water and sewer. How are we going to get the state to address that? Are they going to give us tools to do it?
Right.
Are they going to continue to focus on transportation? We think if they start talking about infrastructure, they need to do so in a global sense, not just limited to transportation.
That's
Let's
just
deal
one
with
component.
Let's deal with water and sewer and the other parts of providing a backbone, if you will, a foundation for a good economy.
Well, one of the issues that's on everyone's mind throughout at least the metro Atlanta area is traffic problems and traffic congestion. As we know, the General Assembly did not address this issue or did not take any action on transportation initiatives, and there were a number of initiatives that were put forward. Can you, from GMA's perspective, can you talk a little bit about what happened in this most recent session? Some of the things that you would like to see happen in the next session, because we're through with that one and we're working on the next session.
Well, the transportation was certainly, if taxes were one of the T's they talked about, and trauma care was the other T they talked about, and didn't do anything about either one of them. Transportation was the other T if they dealt with. And it was up to the 40th day, the last night of the session, probably 11:30 at night, when the House passed its version of a transportation bill. Well, it was a conference committee report. The Senate failed to adopt the constitutional amendment, and so after a year of work, they're back to the drawing board. The Georgia Municipal Association was 4 to 5 years ago, our Legislative Policy Council, frustrated over a lack of dialogue on transportation funding, not only in Metro Atlanta, but statewide, threw out a proposal that we called Mobility Now, which was a local option regional sales tax that could help fund the transportation problems we have around the state. That was then we just threw it out there for dialogue purposes. We needed to jumpstart the whole dialogue on transportation. The Metro Atlanta Chamber took that issue and molded it into a regional sales tax proposal. The Senate's version was more of a it was a regional tax with them keeping some of the money. The House version of the bill initially was a statewide sales tax.
Right, 1%
1%,
statewide.
and then they changed it back to a regional tax with 100% of the proceeds staying within the region. Our major concern about both of those versions of the bills was what role does the city of Douglasville, or what role does the city of Atlanta, or the city of Alapaha around the state, what role do they have in determining those priorities, and what role do they have on determining whether they're going to be part or not part of that region?
That's right.
One of the issues in the bill was an opt-out provision. It's a technical term that once a list of projects are developed, a county commission would have the ability to determine whether they want to opt out of the sales tax. Well, we thought they ought to do so with the complicity of the city officials.
Especially in Douglas County, you're considering 70% of that tax is collected in the city.
Exactly.
So citizens in the city, I agree with you, should have had a voice in that.
The bill did not have that, so that was a major concern of ours. And we also thought if they're going to do it through a constitutional amendment, that the constitutional amendment ought to be as narrow as it can be and not be a comprehensive constitutional amendment that would forevermore restrict members of the General Assembly and local officials in addressing transportation. I need to make a point, is that the differences in transportation needs are significantly different between Metro Atlanta and the rest of the state.
Absolutely.
And number two is that there's no reason whatsoever they need a constitutional amendment to do it. The General Assembly can do this by a general bill of 50% plus one. I think the constitutional amendment approach was they wanted to do a straw ballot,
Sure.
a straw poll on what citizens really thought about this. And obviously, we think that if they gave you the tools to do it, you could sell your own citizens on what the priorities, what the needs are. That issue, I think there's a lot of disappointment in the business community that it didn't pass. We think that the bill will come back up in some shape, form, or fashion next year. But we would urge them to look differently at Metro Atlanta versus the rest of the state. I just got back from South Georgia on Friday after doing some listening sessions with our members. And the issues that they have with transportation are give us money to pave our roads or to repave our roads.
Right.
They can repave their roads once every 200 years now, based upon the amount of money they're getting from the state government. A city of population of 10 or 12,000 gets maybe a tenth of a mile or 3/4 of a mile. One got 600 feet. And so those issues are different than dealing with congestion and air pollution mitigation in Metro Atlanta and moving people and goods through transit and other integrated systems. I think we need to think differently about addressing traffic problems in Metro Atlanta than we are in the rest of the state.
Well, and I believe you're exactly right, Paul. One size does not fit all. There's not one solution that's a statewide solution. We're unique to some degree here in the Metro Atlanta area because predominantly our problems are congestion. For over 20 years, I drove into Atlanta, I know, and it was much worse that last year than it was that first year. And so I can appreciate all the problems that folks are having, although I don't have to do that every day now. But it is a problem that the Metro Atlanta area is the economic engine for the state, just like Douglasville is the economic engine for Douglas County. And unless that problem is addressed in the more rural areas now where sales tax are collected and some distributed on a statewide level, that money is going to continue to dwindle. We've already seen a number of corporations that have not selected the Atlanta area as a site to move to, primarily because of transportation problems, not only for their employees, but moving goods and providing service in the area. So it's really something that we must address. One size is not going to fit all. I think many of us believe that if the money is spent where it's collected, for example, if you collect money in the city of Douglasville, you spend it on transportation here. Or if you collect it in the Metro Atlanta area, you spend it in the Metro Atlanta area. It needs to be, I think, that's just my personal opinion, a situation where it's not just 1% that's collected and somehow distributed under the gold dome based on who you know or who you don't know. It's no longer going to work. What do you see for the initiatives next year? What's GMA's position going to be, do you believe?
Well, we'll find out as we conclude our listening sessions that we're having around the state. As I mentioned in an earlier discussion, is that GMA and its 12 districts around the state starts its legislative policy now in trying to find out what our members are concerned about. And we'll address that particular issue, and then our Legislative Policy Council will help craft our position. I don't know what our final position will be on this one. I don't know if I do know that many of our folks still say that they need to be dealing with water and sewer as well.
Right.
And whether we'll advocate a statewide tax or whether we would advocate a regional tax. One of our concerns of some of our city officials is a new sales tax, whether it be a regional in nature, would compete. If it's a local option, a regional sales tax, it would compete with your special purpose local option sales tax that helps you address with your parks and your public buildings and and public safety and those types of things, or it can compete with your education SPLOST in terms of building new schools, keeping up with that population. Okay. And there's some concern that that would compete with those taxes. We will be looking to our members and say, what is it that you want us to advocate for? We do know that transportation is a problem, but we also recognize, as you just stated earlier, that the problems in Southwest Georgia differ markedly from the problems of Metro Atlanta. We have to figure out how do we articulate that to the General Assembly. We would hope that the General Assembly would take a look at those types of options, something outside of Atlanta and something within the Atlanta area.
I think it all goes back to home rule, what we talked about at the beginning of the show. As the local officials talk with those that they represent on a local level and relay that to our legislators in a General Assembly, we would hope that they would react on what our citizens are asking for.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much,
well, thank
Paul.
you.
That is a very important issue.
Yeah. And hopefully that this time next year we can say that the General Assembly has worked with cities and counties to come up with a transportation funding solution that will help us over a period of years, and that we have looked at taxes in a comprehensive way and respectful of local decision making.
Well, working together, I hope we can certainly make that happen.
Yep, I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Georgia Department of Transportation has implemented a major traffic shift as part of an ongoing project on Georgia Highway 92 over I-20 in Douglasville and Douglas County. The Georgia Department of Transportation urges motorists to use alternate routes to bypass delays. Access to all businesses along Highway 92 will be maintained throughout the construction project. Shawnee Trail and Van Sant Road will both be closed and detour signs will be in place. As a result of GDOT's lane shift and lane reduction, motorists who normally drive this area and are accustomed to a 12-foot wide through lane and a 16-foot wide turn lane will now find that all lanes are 11 foot in width. The temporary lane shift and reduction allows for 2 through southbound lanes, 1 through northbound lane, and 1 center turn lane. The newly widened Hospital Drive provides alternate access to I-20. The City of Douglasville and GDOT are asking all residents and motorists to use extreme caution in this work area and observe work zone safety. The city encourages people to continue to patronize these businesses along Fairburn Road, Westmoreland Plaza, and Cherokee Boulevard, but for the normal through traffic on Highway 92, Fairburn Road, the city encourages you to find an alternate route for the next several months.
Well, thank you for being with us today for this two-part series with Mr. Paul Radford. And thank you to Paul for being with us today on this two-part series, talking about some of the initiatives in the Georgia General Assembly that are important to all of us. So, thank you for being with us on today's Ask the Mayor.